Hello everyone, this video is about the Kaiserin Augusta cruiser. This is a pretty unique cruiser of the German Kaiser Licker Marine. Let's get into the video. The year is 1890. Germany, newly unified, sets its sights on global power. A strong navy is essential. The Kaiser Licker Marine, Germany's navy, lays down a new ship, SMS Kaiserin Augusta. But let's go back to 1887 for a little bit of background. Design work on Kaiserin Augusta began in 1887 and was completed in 1889. At the time, the chief of the Kaiserlich Admiralty, Imperial Admiralty, General Leo von Capri, favored a fleet of cruisers to defend German maritime interests. Caprivi, who then Prince Wilhelm supported, believed that such vessels should first and foremost have powerful engines capable of propelling them at great speed. Guns of medium caliber and light armor protection were necessary to make the ships effective combat vessels, and an impressive appearance would enhance their ability to show the flag. New cruisers would be needed to scout for the main battle fleet and to patrol Germany's growing colonial empire. But unlike the British Royal Navy, which had the funding and resources to build specialized scouts and overseas cruisers, budgetary restrictions forced the German Navy to design ships that could fulfill both roles. Up to the mid 1880s, German cruising vessels were primarily intended for overseas service for training duties. The Bismarck, oh no, not that Bismarck, that Bismarck. There was a class of corvettes at that time named Bismarck. Actually, there were several ships at that time named Bismarck. They named the Bismarck to be named the Bismarck that would be later named the Bismarck. Anyway, the Bismarck and Colonel class of screw corvettes had little fighting value. The corvettes Nixie and Charlotte were purely training vessels. In 1886, the two Irene-class protected cruisers were laid down. These were the first modern cruisers of the German fleet. Senior naval officers debated the type of cruiser that should be built next. Vice Admiral Alexander von Mutz and Wilhelm von Wickert, chiefs of the Marine Station ver North Sea Naval Station, and the Marine Station der Ostsee, Baltic Sea Naval Station, respectively, favored building a pure fleet scout for the next large cruiser. Caprivi, supported by the Admiralty Council, supported the idea of building a cruiser that placed more of an emphasis on overseas cruising, which would have been a repeat of the Irene class, albeit with less armor protection. Caprivi believed that German cruisers should only be used for commerce raiding and had no need for armor protection. For the 1889 fiscal year, approved in early 1888, the Reichstag, which means Imperial Diet, approved the construction of a new cruiser under the designation H. Work on the design had already begun in May 1887. Kapitan zur See, which means Captain at Sea, or KZS for short, Frederick von Hartmann agreed that the new cruiser, of which he believed should be the first of four vessels, should be capable of not only commerce destruction, but also battle with enemy cruisers and engaging with coastal defenses on foreign stations. Caprivi and Wilhelm had starkly different views about how the fleet should be oriented, and Caprivi tendered his resignation. Mons replaced him as the Admiralty chief. He immediately stopped design work on the vessel and instructed the design staff to prepare a new vessel that could be an effective reconnaissance ship for the main fleet. Okay, now that we're caught up, back to the design. Wilhelm II overruled Caprivi's decision on omitting armor protection instructing that an armor deck must be incorporated into the new ship. Chief Constructor Alfred Dehicht carried out the work on the new design. The top speed of the new cruiser, 20 knots, required an elongated hull compared to the Irene's, since the longer, finer hull had improved hydrodynamic efficiency. In this effort, Daihatsu was limited by the size of existing dry docks and other port infrastructure. Higher speed came at the cost of reduced maneuverability, which would hamper the ship's ability to fight in a fleet action. Further changes were incorporated, including strengthening the armament, which further delayed the commencement of work on the ship. Daihatsu continued to work on the revised design through late 1888. One of the chief difficulties being the necessary improvements to the propulsion system to retain the desired top speed. The larger, heavier ship would require around 50% more horsepower compared to Irene's propulsion system. The armor deck complicated the arrangement of the engines, since mounting vertical engines of the required power needed to reach 20 knots on two shafts would have necessitated the heavy glacis to extend the armor deck over the engine rooms. As a result, Daihatsu was forced to adopt a three-shaft arrangement, so that the necessary power output could be divided between the three smaller engines. The result was the first major warship that in the world that could use three screws. You know, this ship is what happens when the leadership forces a experienced ship designer to alter his designs. At the same time, the French had also decided on the arrangement for the armored cruiser Depuis de Lumi, but Kaiserin Augusta would be completed first. Ha! Take that, France! However, she is considered by some to be the world's first armored cruiser. So, yay France, I guess. I'm sorry, France. I love you Macrons. While it solved the propulsion system arrangement problem, the three-shaft system also improved the handling characteristics of the ship. The arrangement proved to be successful and was repeated on the Kaiser Frederick III class battleships. The armament was also an issue to be solved while the design was refined. The Naval Command initially rejected the 15cm RKL-30 gun, which was incapable of penetrating deck armor. Since quick-firing guns had been developed up to 10.5cm caliber, the design staff initially adopted to standardize on a battery of 12 10.5cm SKL-35 guns, on the basis that the much faster firing guns could smother a target and destroy unarmored sections of the enemy ship. But as the new ship was enlarged, the designers reverted to the larger but slower 15cm guns, despite their disadvantages. By 1891, the new 15cm SKL-35 gun had been developed. And Daihatsu modified the design for Kaiserin Augusta, construction of which had already begun, to incorporate the much improved weapon. These guns had not been produced in significant numbers to equip Kaiserin Augusta by the time she was completed, and so she was armed with a mixture of the old 15cm and 10.5cm guns. Kaiserin Augusta was in essence an enlarged version of the Aviso Greif, with increased speed, a much more powerful main battery, and heavy armor. But she also picked up many of the same issues as Greif, but worse, which I'll cover in a little bit. General characteristics and machinery. Kaiserin Augusta was 122.2 meters long at the waterline and 123.2 meters long overall. She had a beam of 15.6 meters and a draft of 6.48 meters forward and 7.2 meters aft. She was designed to displace 6,056 metric tons, and at full combat load, the displacement increased to 6,318 tons. Her hull was constructed with transverse and longhexagonal steel frames. The outer wall consisted of a single layer of timber planks, covered with mixed metal, sheathing to protect the wood from fouling. The hull contained 7 watertight compartments and a double bottom that ran for 55% of the length of the vessel. The ship's superstructure was fairly minimal, consisting of a small conning tower with a bridge erected on top of it. Kaiserin Augusta was nearly flush decked. The upper deck terminated shortly before the stern, where it stepped down to a quarter deck. She was fitted with 2 pole masts, equipped with fighting tops. Kaiserin Augusta's crew consisted of 13 officers and 417 enlisted men. She carried several smaller boats, including 2 picket boats, 1 launch, 1 pinnace, 2 cutters, 2 yawls, and 2 dinghies. But here's the worst part I mentioned before. While Greif had a slight pitch and significantly more roll, Kaiserin Augusta suffered from severe pitch and roll, though these effects were reduced in heavy winds and a beam sea. It must be a problem that the ship only works well in heavy seas. The forecastle shipped excessive amounts of water in a head sea. The ship maneuvered poorly, although this was improved at high speed. The transverse metacentric height was 0.78 meters. The ship vibrated excessively at high speeds, earning her the nickname Cocktail Shaker. This was most likely the result of placing the propeller shafts too close to the hull. The ship was powered by three-cylinder triple expansion steam engines built by A.G. Germada, which drove a screw that was 4.5 meters in diameter. Each engine had its own engine room. The central engine was arranged vertically, but the outer band engines were placed horizontally to keep the armor deck as low as possible. The engines were supplied with steam by 8 cylindrical double fire tube boilers split into 3 boiler rooms. The boilers were ducted into 3 funnels. Kaiserin Augusta was equipped with 4 electrical generators, providing 48 kilowatts at 67 volts. Steering was controlled by a single rudder. The engines were rated at 12,000 metric horsepower at a top speed of 21 knots, which is 24 miles per hour. Although on trials they reached a half a knot better at 4,000 horsepower during a 6-hour test. However, figures for her 1-hour forced draft test are missing from the Navy's surviving records, but unofficial contemporary sources credit Kaiserin Augusta with speeds up to 22.5 knots. The recorded speed of 21.5 knots rendered her one of the fastest cruisers in the world at that time, and she was the fastest ship in the German fleet at the time of her completion. Coal storage amounted to 700 tons at a cruising speed of 12 knots. The ship could steam for 3,240 nautical miles. Another 110 tons could be carried elsewhere without negatively affecting stability, which would extend her cruising radius. Armament. As built, Kaiserin Augusta was initially armed with the main battery of 4 15cm KL-30 guns with a total of 292 rounds of ammunition. This was supported by a secondary battery of 8 10.5cm SKL-35 guns with 777 rounds of ammunition. She also carried 8 88cm SKL-30 guns with 1,361 rounds of ammunition and 4 machine guns. The medium caliber 15cm and 10.5cm guns were mounted in Sponsen's casemates in the main deck of the ship. One quick thing. Kaiserin Augusta is the only ship of her class, so I will do the full history of this ship. The ship was also equipped with 5 35cm torpedo tubes with 13 torpedoes. 4 were placed in swivel mounts on the broadside, and 1 was placed in the bow below the waterline. From 1893 to 1895, during a refit to correct defects in her construction, her armament was updated. The old 15cm and 10.5cm guns were replaced with 12 15cm SKL-35 guns that had a maximum range of 12,600 meters. The guns were supplied with a total of 1,064 shells. Like the previous battery, these guns were placed in casemates in the hull. After 1907, the swivel-mounted torpedo tubes were removed, leaving only the tube in the bow with 3 torpedoes. Armor. The ship's armor consisted primarily of a curved armor deck of Krupp steel, which sloped downward at the sides to meet the hull, 1.5 meters below the waterline. The flat portion was 50 millimeters thick on the flat portion. The deck increased in thickness to 75 millimeters on the sides, where it covered the propulsion machinery spaces. The sides were reduced to 50 millimeters further forward and aft. At the bow, the deck armor extended down to reinforce the bow so that it could be used for ramming attacks. The conning tower had 50 millimeter thick sides and a 22 millimeter thick roof. Below the conning tower, a communication tube that received 100 millimeters of steel armor protected the steering gear leads and the voice tubes that relayed commands from the bridge. The 88cm guns were fitted with 12 millimeter gun shields. Chapter 2. Germany's unique modern cruiser. Service history of the Kaiserin Augusta. This is going to be a pretty long one, so buckle up. Construction 1896. The keel of Kaiserin Augusta was laid down at the German Naval shipyard in Kiel in May 1890. This was a time of rapid technological change in warship design. She was launched on the 15th of January 1892. And at the ceremony, the vessel was christened Kaiserin Augusta by Prince Heinrich of Prussia, the grandson of the ship's namesake, Empress Augusta. The ship, completed with her provisional armament, was commissioned to begin sea trials less than a year later on the 17th of November 1892. The trials were interrupted by the need to send modern cruisers to represent Germany at the celebration of Christopher Columbus's first voyage across the Atlantic Ocean. Celebrations in Gona, Italy, later that year prompted negative remarks over the German representative. The protected cruiser Princess Wilhelm figures. As a result, Kaiserin Augusta's trials were interrupted in early 1893 to send her and the unprotected cruiser Siedler to New York City in the United States for the ceremonies. Kaiserin Augusta left Kiel on the 29th of March under the command of KZS Wilhelm Buchzel and met Zero in Halifax, Canada. There, Kaiserin Augusta took Siedler in tow, the latter vessel having run out of coal. The two ships reached Hampton Roads, U.S. on April 26, where Kaiserin Augusta made a significant impression, having achieved an average speed of 21.5 knots on her crossing of the Atlantic. Ships then proceeded to New York for the celebrations before departing on May 13th. Siedler returned to German East Africa, while Kaiserin Augusta recrossed the Atlantic, arriving in Kiel on June 2nd. The voyage had revealed structural problems with the ship, and so she was decommissioned for modifications on June 21st. During this period, her standard armament was installed as well. Work was completed by mid-1894, but Kaiserin Augusta's engines broke down during initial trials and had to be completely rebuilt. Repairs were not finished until early 1895, and she was finally ready to be recommissioned on April 3rd. Other trials followed, and on May 9th, she accidentally ran aground on the Keeler Ford. She was pulled free by the old ironclad Bandon, and some some shipyard tugboats. After repairs were completed, she participated in the opening ceremonies for the Kaiser Wilhelm Canal on June 21st. She led a group of 21 unarmored ships, in company with the 4 Brandenburg-class battleships, the 4 Susan-class ironclads, and 4 of the Siegfried-class coastal defense ships. Hey, some familiar faces. I made a video about these ships in a previous video. 2 German merchants had been murdered in Morocco. The protected cruiser Irene had been sent to secure the indemnity, but the German government determined that the amount Morocco had agreed to pay was insufficient. In July, the Navy sent Kaiserin Augusta under the command of KZS Oskar von Schuckmann to seek a larger payment. She was joined there by the steam corvettes Marie and Skost and the coastal defense ship Huygen. First Squadron, which was on a training cruise in the Mediterranean Sea, extended its cruise so that it would also be in the region to apply pressure on the Moroccan government. Schuckmann participated in the negotiations, along with the German ambassador. The gunboat diplomacy was successful and achieved its aims, but the operation was heavily criticized, especially in Britain, where anti-German sentiment was beginning to rise. Kaiserin Augusta left Tangler on the 5th of August and arrived in German waters on August 18th, where she joined the annual fleet maneuvers. On the 20th of December, she finally completed sea trials, and 3 days later was assigned as a guard ship in Wilhelmshaven. While there, she also served as a training vessel for engine room personnel. From March 10th, 1896, Kaiserin Augusta escorted Wilhelm II's yacht Heiserzollern on a cruise in the Mediterranean that lasted until the 1st of May. Late June to the 8th of November, the ship was occupied with extensive individual and squadron training exercises. In February 1897, an international naval demonstration took place off Crete to protest Greece's attempted annexation of the island to prevent another Greco-Turkish war. Augusta was the sole German contribution to the international squadron, receiving orders to join the fleet on the 6th of February and arriving in Soda Bay on the 21st of February. Korvettenkapitän, or Corvette Captain, KK for short, Leopold Kollner, the ship's captain, was under orders to act on his own discretion, but also in accordance with the warships of the other great powers. Kaiserin Augusta and other vessels shelled Greek volunteers who were attacking China on February 21st. On March 15th, she sent 50 men ashore to reinforce the international landing party that had gone ashore to stop the fighting. The ship operated as a part of the Light Division, along with the Italian torpedo cruiser Chapra, the Austro-Hungarian cruiser Tiger, the French destroyer Fouchon, and the Russian gunboat, I'm not going to even try to pronounce that. Ships were tasked with blocking Greek attacks in the area around Soda Bay. For her efforts in stopping their attacks, Greek volunteers nicknamed her the Damned White Ship. Despite the efforts of the great powers, the Greco-Turkish War of 1897 broke out on the 17th of April. Ottoman successes in the conflict threatened to provoke a revolution in Greece, and so the international squadron sent most of its ships, including Kaiserin Augusta, to Paris in an attempt to stabilize the country. On the 8th of November, Kaiserin Augusta went to Simria in the Ottoman Empire, where she received orders to go to East Asia. The ship returned to Crete on November 19th to receive her landing party before embarking on the voyage to Asia. Immediately following the seizure of Judo Bay leased territory in China, Admiral Otto von Hitzerwerts, the commander of the East Asia Squadron, requested reinforcements to secure the new colonial territory. He specifically asked for Kaiserin Augusta, along with additional ground troops, to garrison the port. The ship was joined by the cruisers Deutschland and Giffen, which carried the 3rd Sea Battalion, and Colmaran. As Kaiserin Augusta had been stationed in the Mediterranean, she arrived first on December 30th. Kaiserin Augusta remained in the Guangdong in the Zhuzhou concession until mid-March 1898, when she left to visit the British colony at Hong Kong. She thereafter went on a cruise in the Yellow Sea and visited Nagasaki, Japan, where Der Hitz temporarily came aboard the vessel. Beginning in November, KZS MS served as the ship's commander. Following the outbreak of the Spanish-American War in 1898, Dietrich was ordered to proceed to the Philippines, where Commodore George Dewey had defeated a Spanish squadron commanded by Rear Admiral Pico Montero. Dietrich was instructed to protect local German interests and, if possible, seize another colonial succession in the Philippines. With his ships dispersed on various colonial missions or under repair, Dietrich initially concentrated his forces slowly. He recalled Kaiserin Augusta to serve as his flagship, while the rest of the force assembled. After the end of the Battle of Malina, Kaiserin Augusta steamed to Hong Kong on August 13th, arriving 2 days later. There, the ship notified Berlin of the defeat of the Spanish garrison. She also carried the former Governor-General of the Philippines, Bezo Agustin, out of Malina. In October, the ship brought a detachment of infantry to Daku, at the request of the German ambassador to China, and then traveled overland to Beijing to guard the German legislation there. On November 23rd, Kaiserin Augusta participated in the erection ceremony for the Ich Monument in Shanghai, China, that commemorated the men killed in the wrecking of the gunboat Ilias. She thereafter returned to Guangzhou and went on tours of Chinese and Japanese waters for the rest of the year. On February 27th, 1899, the ship was reclassified as a Grosser Christopher, a large cruiser. The rest of the year passed uneventfully. In October, she went to Vevey, I can't pronounce that, for an overhaul that lasted until the 5th of February, 1900. In late March, the Boxer Uprising broke out in China, prompting the European fleets in Asia to send warships to Taco. Kaiserin Augusta sent men from the 3rd Sea Battalion to Daku. She put 60 men from her crew to assist with Admiral Edward Seymour's relief force to rescue the Europeans in Tenzin. During these operations, the ship's executive officer, K.K. Ottoman, was killed in battle. On the 18th of July, part of the landing party returned to the ship, but the rest remained ashore until mid-September. Kaiserin Augusta served briefly as a squadron flagship under Admiral Emperor Felix von Betterman from October 26th to November 18th, while the armored cruiser Fürst Bismarck was unavailable. Another ship named Bismarck. She spent 1901 in Chinese and Japanese waters, with no events of note during that year. Fregatenkapitan, or Frigate Captain, FK for short, John Stetson served as the ship's commander from January to November 1901, when she was replaced by F.K. Frederick von Ickruns, I can't pronounce that either, though she remained aboard only until March 1902. I mean he. It's a he. I can't speak. I have autism. I can't speak right sometimes. Iker was relieved by KZS Karl Derzik on the 6th of March, 1902. Kaiserin Augusta received orders to return to Germany along with the torpedo boats S-91 and S-92. The vessels arrived back in Kiel on June 7th, and Kaiserin Augusta was decommissioned there on the 16th of June. Later career. Obsolete by the early 1900s, Kaiserin Augusta went to dry dock for an extensive modernization that began in May 1903. During the refit, the ship's generators were replaced with more powerful units that were more than doubled electrical output at 124 kilowatts at 110 volts. Her bridge was significantly expanded with a second deck and extended aft of the foremast. The 3 funnels were lengthened by 2 meters, and 1 searchlight was installed on each of the mast tops. The 4 swivel-mounted torpedo tubes were removed during this period. After emerging from the modernization in late 1905, the ship was placed in reserve. She remained out of service until 1914, following the outbreak of World War I in July that year. Kaiserin Augusta was reactivated for use as a gunnery trading ship to replace the more modern armor cruiser SMS Kaiserin, which joined the High Seas Fleet. Her first commander during that war from August to November was KZS Ferdinand Berdund. Kaiserin Augusta was stationed in the Baltic Sea, and she was assigned to the Coastal Defense Division of the Baltic and in anticipation of a British attack throughout the Danish Straits. To facilitate the training of gunners, the ship's armament was diversified several times throughout the war. The first change was completed in October 30th, when her 15-centimeter guns were removed. By the end of 1914, the threat of a direct British attack in the Baltic had receded. So on the 12th of December, Kaiserin Augusta was removed from the Coastal Defense Division. The ship largely remained in the relative safety of the Western Baltic for the rest of the war. Further alterations were made to her armament as the war progressed. By the end of the conflict, she carried 1 15-centimeter SKL-45 gun, 4 10.5-centimeter SKL-45 guns, 4 88-centimeter SKL-35 guns, 4 88-centimeter SKL-35 guns, 5 88-centimeter SKL-30 guns, and 1 88-centimeter SKL-30 gun in a U-boat mounting. She served in this capacity for the duration of the war, until she was decommissioned on December 14th, 1918. The ship was formally stricken from the Naval Register on the 1st of October, 1919, and sold to the Nordjudith in Berlin, and broken up the next year in Kiel Normal. Although her active service ends inglamorously, her legacy endures. SMS Kaiserin Augusta represents a crucial stage in German naval development. Her service in the Far East highlights the importance of naval power protecting national interests abroad. While her career was relatively short, she paves the way for the larger, more powerful German warships to follow. That's it for this video. I hope you learned something, although I messed up this video many times and had to start over many lines. Although I did have some fun making this video. Hit that like button and subscribe for more history videos like this one.